is really an important election. Whoever is sheriff of our county has a hard job, and you've heard me say this before, but they have to be a little bit manager and public official. They have to have a public presence about them. They don't have to, but it really comes in handy. And also they have to be a very good police officer. So they need really a variety of skills. And I think we have some really good candidates in that venue. So Jordan, this is Jordan White, and he has 22 years of public service under his belt. He started out in Big Fork as a volunteer for the ambulance service out there as a paramedic. Then he went to be a firefighter as a volunteer. And for Montana, that's really an important ethic we have. You know, volunteering in our community is something that mostly citizens have done in Montana. And it's one of the few places that I've lived where I've seen it done to this extent. And Jordan epitomizes that with his volunteer work. And he started that when he was 18 years old. He then joined the Flathead County Sheriff's Office as a volunteer. And then he was hired on as an officer, and he worked his way up to diver. And one of the things I do like about all of our sheriff candidates is they all do have a real good variety of law enforcement background. He also co-founded Two Bear Air Rescue, and he has a 10 years of business management experience. So, without further ado, Jordan White.
Jackie, and thank you all for being here. I have learned so much just being involved in pachyderm and getting to see this process. When I began this journey, and I would say it started a long, long time ago, people said, you're going to hate politics. What I've learned so far is I've been in politics, I think since about 18 when I worked in Glacier National Park as a horse wrangler running the horse concession. And if you look up the definition of politics, I think most of you would agree that you're also there. So now I'm proud to say that I am asking for the public's trust in a position of government, because that's more realistic and more practical. And Warren, I appreciate you announcing to everyone here that you were not born in Montana. I've been dreading this as the other candidates for sheriff talk about generations and generations. My parents didn't move me here until I was almost 3. So I have 37 years of experience in the valley. I don't have the deepest roots, but I've had an amazing life and an amazing career, and I'm so grateful for the journey that's brought me to this moment. I'm not going to go into great lengths necessarily to tell you my whole life story because time is limited, and I'll have another event next week if you guys want to come down to Vista Linda and hear more. Because I believe when we look at our paths, and I'll share a little bit as I do that, we share our stories, and it's really an indication of the results that we've produced in our lives. And I think that those results matter most definitely in a few areas. One, when you say you want to lead a community. One, when you meet the love of your life and you want to get married. And lastly, when you die and you get a full inventory of your life. So all of them have long-term, if not eternal, consequences. And I have naturally done a large inventory of my own life before making the commitment to go into the election office like many of you in this room did and say, I'm ready to serve. The choice between us, even though we all have such dynamic backgrounds, is really, it comes down to a choice between candidates based in a few areas. Our standards, our strategies, and our beliefs. Those are what have guided us to these places. You know, the values that were instilled in us as children and the way that we grew up, which I think is why our heritage and where we came from and how we live is so important. But there's also many bumps in the road that get us to the point that we're ready. One example of that is I remember having had a long background in emergency medicine. I just knew when people asked me when I was like 7 years old, what do you want to be? It was between a cop and a fireman. I really missed the boat because firemen marketed themselves much better. But as I grew up in these different experiences, I had opportunities, and I, of course, experimented with all of them. I wanted to be a rescue swimmer when I was 18 years old, but like I said before, I was already running my first company when I was 18 and had the opportunity to begin running the Far West, the company, the crew, hiring people, managing a business under excellent mentorship, and I couldn't turn that opportunity down. So while doing that, I jumped into emergency medicine, which I transitioned into full-time. But as my career expanded, I had the opportunity, because one of the responsibilities of the sheriff is the coroner position. Not every county is like that, but Flathead is one of them. And having my background in emergency medicine and having mentored even under Chuck 22 years ago, it was suggested, like, would you consider being a coroner? And I believe that for us to do anything effectively and successfully in our lives, we need experience, education, and passion, or in this case, compassion. And I didn't feel it was the right time. It wasn't until 11 years ago when my dad passed away. I was actually raised by my stepdad and carry his name, and that's who I identify as my dad. But he passed away, and for the first time in my life, I knew that I had experienced enough loss to be able to fill the role of deputy coroner with the level of compassion and dignity to be able to honor that position. That still was part of my growing process, but when I think about the other things that define me in my life, one of the other is my conviction, my certainty in certain areas. And now I was homeschooled, so I didn't get the same upbringing that most people do, and it wasn't necessarily a choice, because in my era when you were homeschooled, you either couldn't succeed in school or your parents couldn't succeed in public, so you got homeschooled. Fortunately for me, my parents were highly educated, and they saw it as a way to double down on their commitment to their children, to raise my brother and I and teach us everything that they knew. But I bypassed a lot of those outside influences, which is why I did drive school bus for 1 year when I was 20, just to understand what I had missed, and I found out it wasn't much. I did it. It was a great experience. But I remember, as I thought about the specific moments in my life that prepared me to be sheriff, to prepare me to sign my name in that dotted line and ask for the public's trust. And it's not because I've done everything right. It's just because I've done a few things repeatedly and consistently, again, right in my life, that I know that I have this position in front of you to ask for that support. And I remember back to 2005, our dive team had been in existence for a year and a half. Chuck and I had formed that after a 6-day dive mission, actually for another county, but we were the divers that were available, so we did it. And we'd come back and created this volunteer 15-person dive team that would go all over the state ever since. It's still operating at the same capacity, which is where the power of volunteerism is so profound, because people doing what they want to do and what they're passionate about. But I hadn't failed yet, and I was very confident. And a case had been assigned to me that I wasn't the initial investigator on. I hadn't even really reviewed the case, but dispatch put a phone call through. It was my Monday. I just glanced through my box, and I took the call not knowing what to expect, and it was a gentleman who said, "I'm calling about those toe bones that I read about in the paper." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that report's in my box. What can I do for you?" He said, "That's my son." And I had that same reaction that Moanahan just had, and I sat down, because the phone was on the wall, had a cord back then, and I said, tell me about your son. And he said, "My son, David Almos, has been missing since 1972. He and his friend went missing, and his friend, Jay Richardson, was found that summer, but my son has never been found." He said, "I just know when I read that it was my son." He said, "I'm absolutely certain." Now, today I would probably ask a few questions, but back then I was certain too. And then without thinking about it, I said, "Sir, if that's your son, I'm going to bring him home." I didn't know that there had been a previous sock recovered from Whitefish Lake in 1985, 87, that also had toe bones in it, that there had been a full dive operation that searched the lake in 1972 after Jay Richardson was found. I didn't know that there had been a whole nother full dive operation that had been conducted in the 1980s. I just know knew what I knew at that moment with complete certainty, that if his son was in that lake, I'd bring him home. About 2 weeks into diving every day after work, my first dive to 80 feet, I thought, what in the world was I thinking? The visibility is horrible, the search area is expansive. I have a better chance at failing than succeeding. But I knew there was no going back. I had made my conviction statement, I had felt that conviction, and I was going to do it. So we brought in volunteers as they were available in the evenings and before work and things, because I was on patrol rotating shifts. And we would dive that. And finally, right before we'd scheduled a full-scale dive mission to try to find him, and a full press thing, and family flying in from out of town, and this brothers telling me how they'd hired private investigators through the years hoping to find their son, or his brother in that case, trusting that he was still out there somewhere. I found the Dusty Duster off a skull in 86 feet of water that was completely entombed in silt. That next Sunday, that was a Thursday, by Sunday we recovered the entire skeleton, all personal remains, including the eyeglasses with the name inscribed that allowed us to make a positive identification. That's just one of many stories that I'm so proud of in my career, that as I stand forward and I say, what do I believe? What are my standards? What are my strategies? This is the people business. In my race for sheriff, I haven't talked a lot about added technology, about the jail, about things, because I guarantee we're going to get a new jail. I have some strong feelings about that. I feel it should be built right where we are already. We don't need to move it. We already have invested a ton of money in what we have. So let's just expand what we have to meet our need now and anticipate what's going forward. I've been involved in those plans by choice for 14 years, because I always believed that we would get there, we would need all of us on board, and I plan to be here for the long haul. So I've been involved in every study that's been done ever since. That's going to happen. I believe we will have technology added. The technology is inevitable. I look forward to it. It's going to change the way we work. It's also changed what we do already. And in some areas, I don't get very excited about what it's done. I remember the first time that I was driving a patrol car because my computer didn't work, and I sat at a stop sign, and I looked around at the people at the intersection before, and I waved at the little kid next to me, and I remembered that for so long I had my nose shoved so far into that computer in my patrol car, I forgot to look around and I forgot to wave at my friends and neighbors. They notice. Technology should help us do our job more effectively. It should help us spend more time with the public, more time in our schools, more time in our communities, more time going door to door. I started a school resource officer program when I was an officer in West Yellowstone at the very beginning of my career before I got hired back here full time, because I could see it back then almost 20 years ago. There was a disconnect occurring because we were just getting too busy and we were losing touch. We all tried to do it. We even have email on our cell phones now so we could spend less time at work. But what that means now is that when you wake up in the morning, instead of looking into your wife's or husband's eyes and telling them how much you love them, you pick up your phone and you check your email, and you do it before you go to bed, or Facebook, or whatever. And I think technology's good, and we need to use it. We're going to be using it because we're a small agency. We don't have to try every new thing that comes out. We actually just have to build relationships with the other agencies that are already using it and have tried it and have found what works, and we incorporate it. I did that same thing when I was the SAR coordinator. I didn't know how we were going to be more effective with technology, but I knew that if we changed the way we do things, because if our standards, our beliefs, and our strategies are not always changing, we will not grow. And if we do not grow, we will decay. So even back then, I looked at ways of incorporating air travel. I wanted a time machine because I want more time. Don't we all want more time? But I couldn't get any more time. How many people in here own or manage a business? Just curious. A lot of you. I mean, I've had great opportunities, but you understand the value. There's value in time because it's money. But it's also relationships. And the more time you spend, I own my own company, some have done well, some haven't. But when they don't go well, you work really hard at them and put in a lot of time, and you lose that connection. But for us, we have an opportunity, especially as the public safety entity of the Sheriff's Office that's far-reaching and depends on so many elements in the community, can connect so many elements of the community through coordination and communication and teamwork, to focus on those areas and let every single tool available to us support the vision and the direction that we can take. My first perfect, wind it down. I often get asked what would be the first thing that I would do if I was elected sheriff. First thing I would do would be an internal and external needs assessment, done including the sworn and non-sworn staff of the sheriff's office, the other team members of the criminal justice system, and our partners in the community organizations and public, private individuals, business owners. What are we doing well and what do we need to improve? And it doesn't need to just be one time. That would be my first priority, but it needs to be a continual question that we ask, because we're going to find the answers to whatever we want to be right about. I don't want to be right about the fact that nothing in the sheriff's office needs to change. I'm so grateful to be in a race with 3 other men who I've worked with, respect, and we've been in it together. And I know that at the sheriff's office, there's a ton of people. They didn't sign up because the money's so good. They didn't sign up for anything other than to make a profound impact on their communities, and sometimes things can get a little stuck in the mud. But my first priority is to hear their voice, to reach out to those around us and begin to find solutions to open those lines up, to maintain an atmosphere where people do want to continue to come, they continue to want to grow and teach, and they want to volunteer, because we can't grow leaps and bounds. We have to grow on a sliding, gradual trajectory that's reasonable, and we can make those lumps financially by incorporating as much community support. So again, I have another event on the 12th. You're welcome to come and ask more questions, but I want to get a few before we run out of time. What can I answer for you fine folks? Yes, ma'am.
How closely do you relate the social problems that we have now with education, number one, that has gone astray, and also prescription drugs such as Prozac and so forth?
I feel that I've worked a lot in instruction, personal development, professional development, business development, and I believe that the choices that we make, good, bad, or self-destructive, are to meet basic human needs. And whether it's drug addiction, lashing out, violence, lack of communication, something is we all have certain needs. We have a need for certainty and a need for variety, for contribution and growth, for connection and significance. And if you look at someone, and that's what I did why I started the school resource officer program, there was just one snippet because of someone that was struggling, and it was a group of people struggling to get connection, have significance, to see that I see you. So they got away with bad behavior that for a while, and then that brought them to the surface. We see bad behavior. Let's see good behavior. But I believe that when we look at choices we've made socially to change those things, our best Olympians are outstanding. But we take our kids and we live in a world where everybody gets a participation trophy. I don't get a participation trophy, neither does anyone else in here who chose to serve in the government if they don't win. We need to begin to remind our people, young and old, that there are consequences, results, often harsh, always fair. We have to own it as a community.
One more question.
Mr. Skees.
Thank you, sir. If you build it, they will come with this prison. If you just start making bigger and bigger jail space, you're going to fill it. Is there another option? Because you know that addiction leads to fraud, addiction leads to violence, addiction leads to theft. Is there another solution besides just building?
Of course there is. My first answer to that is, what are we going to focus on? If our focus is that we must have a bigger, better jail, and all of our efforts are that way, and we cannot keep our community safe until we have a bigger, better jail, just like I said before, we will always be right about what we want to be right about. What if I said, well, I know that our jail will grow and expand because our community continues to grow and expand. Just in the time that I've lived here, we've doubled in size in my lifetime. We will continue to grow because this is a great place to live, so every part of our infrastructure must increase, including our jail. But that's a byproduct of growth. It shouldn't be a tool for us to do our jobs effectively. It should always figure out how can we get more ingrained in the community to stop bad things earlier on and begin to put triggers in and breakers in to get our attention early as parents and as community leaders.
All right, well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay.